it's Coach Tori, and this is Raising Runners. We talk running, fitness, mental health, and so many more topics. As the founder of a youth running program, I approach all of our conversations with our youth athletes in mind and kind of have a focus around those things. But as you will see, we are finding that all of these topics relate to runners and people who like to move and do fitness or anything like that. Relates to everybody. Check it out. In today's episode, I get to talk to Coach Gumbs from EmpowerMe Academy. They are a youth sport program in the San Francisco Bay Area, I believe. Super cool what he has going on, really trying to shape the youth sport culture, make it a more positive experience, really bringing value and lifelong lessons to the youth sports that we have going on now. He talks to us about burnout in sports, also what parents, coaches, adults that work with kids or athletes, what we can do to try to make things better. You know, what kind of direction are we able to go in? So he really shares like all of his really great information, but also talks about what EmpowerMe Academy is, their values, what they stand for, and all the really cool things that they do. All right, so I guess we can start with, if you want to introduce yourself so that we know who we have here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Tori. And my name is Coach Gumbs. And I started EmpowerMe Academy, and I'm glad to be here.
All right, and we're definitely going to talk about EmpowerMe Academy, but I do want to talk about other things first, because I feel like if we start there, we may just talk about that the entire time, which is great, but
Yeah.
I do have other questions for you. So we kind of found each other, and like the whole idea was talking about what you do at EmpowerMe Academy, but like kids getting burnt out on sports and how there's things that we can do not to have that happen. So can you just talk a little bit about some of the things that you teach the kids to help them want to stay engaged and active in sports?
Yeah, great question. And I think, you know, burnout has become a huge issue in youth sports because of the specialization. And I think, you know, I think that's the first thing I try to coach families and students on is, while you're young, enjoy all the sports, because I think every sport can teach you intangible lessons that actually improves your life, but also adds value to the other sports. So I think, you know, avoiding specialization is one. I think time management is also a very important component, and really prioritizing, you know, when to involve yourself into the sports, but also allowing children to be children. You know, I think we live in a world now where children are not being allowed to be themselves and really grow into adulthood. And oftentimes having them be overcommitted to all these sports and all these, you know, commitments at a young age really prohibits them from just having a childhood, you know. So I think specialization, time management, and being very tactical and putting them in environments where it's about empowerment, or it's about nurturing the human and not the athlete. And I think what we've done at EMA is really develop a culture where we're speaking to the human first and the athlete second. So there's many other points that I can bring up how to reduce burnout, but I think those three things are very important. Culture is very important, because even if you do different sports, if the culture is not positive and it's toxic, that also can exacerbate the need to feel burnt out.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get into how you create the culture at EmpowerMe Academy. But first, just a question more so for myself. Time management, and like that, I think something even us adults have trouble with sometimes. But how do you work on that with kids? Like, because I feel like that's not something like that comes naturally, and maybe it's just me and time management's not a forte of mine, but how do you really work on that with them?
These are great questions. I think teaching people the power of priority. right? Prioritizing stuff. And I think we as adults, because we have so much going on, and I think COVID just threw a monkey wrench into everyone's lives, which I think not even for negative, but it allowed us to step back and really understand what was important to all of us. Because I think until COVID, all of us were running around trying to be to every event, not realizing a lot of those things weren't really important. So I think in order to really understand time management, you need to understand how to prioritize stuff in your life. And again, going back to your initial question, I think children need to understand they need to have me time as a child. And maybe that me time is me being with other friends. Maybe me time is me, having time to read a book, So I think really teaching them how to prioritize and also minimizing distractions. I think we as adults, we're grappling onto something we never really prepared for, which is technology. There's no blueprint in how to teach our children how to prioritize and how to distance themselves from technology. And we have to understand we're battling an ecosystem, or I like to say a monster, because these big companies are paying hundreds and thousands of dollars to people to teach them how to get our children hooked to technology. So I think teaching them how to prioritize stuff and teaching them how to minimize distractions. I think technology has really made it very difficult for us to really teach our children a lot of valuable life lessons. Yeah. So yeah,
I love
teaching
that
them
you,
how to, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
oh, no, I was going to say, I love that you're saying minimize distractions as I'm following my toddler around my house, right? Completely distracted. But yes, we need to do that, because that's a huge thing for, figuring out priorities, right? Is how distracted we can be. And like you said, the world now is like just catered to being distracted. People are on their
Yes,
phone while they're walking, they're on their phone while they're
yes.
driving, you're doing 8 things at once. So,
Yep.
I think that's super great. So you talked a little bit about you talked about a culture change. And what kind of culture, you talked a little bit about, like the individualized, like, you have to see the person, not so much like the athlete necessarily. Can you talk a little bit about the culture then that you try to create as a coach?
Yes, Dirk, most certainly. I think the whole reason for developing EMA was to help change the narrative of why children interact with sports. And if I can preface with, there was once upon a time where our coaches were our counselors, our coaches were our teachers, our coaches were people that understand the emotional intelligence that was needed to interact with a child. And therefore, because of that landscape, people were able to connect with children. I don't think you can really empower a child or coach a child until you learn how to connect with them, right? And I think what's happening is cultures are so predicated on winning that we forget that we're also creating a platform to help people grow into their best version. I don't think those two things can really exist on the youth level, because our children are continuing to evolve until they get to an age where they have become adults. So you're only focused on winning, then you're really robbing that person that's partaking in that sport that you're coaching of really self-actualizing, right? So I think the culture that we've embedded in EMA's ecosystem, that it's not really about winning, it's about you winning within yourself and really find your true passion to evolve into the best version of yourself. I think from the time we were all born, that is the most important thing for all of us, is to become our best self, because on that trajectory, we're able to impact not only ourselves, but the people we engage with. So, yeah.
I love that you brought up, like, winning, it really isn't everything. And I think as much as we can say that, and it sounds so obvious, everything we're doing, especially with our kids, like, there's winners and there's losers, and there's a goal of winning, right? Like, I don't know any kids soccer teams, for example, that just are learning how to play soccer, just are playing games for fun, right? Like, they're traveling, they're doing tournaments, they're doing all kinds of things because they got to win, right? It's not just
Yeah,
about the practice.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so with that, oh, go ahead.
Well, this is such a huge topic, and this is why I've dedicated my life to combat this culture. Winning is not everything, but it is the byproduct of the right culture. And I think what has happened is a lot of coaches put the carriage before the horse, right? And what that means is they try to focus on winning instead of trying to really create a culture where winning becomes a byproduct of the culture, right? So I just wanted to add that because I think that's what poor coaches do, because it's invisible to them how to develop a culture that breeds success. And winning is not necessarily always equates to success. I think success is when the people partaking in an experience can move on and live a better life because of the experience. And losing is not a bad thing. We actually teach every child at the academy that failure and losing is actually it's an ally, because there's no real growth without failing and making mistakes. We teach our children to embrace mistakes. So that's another thing to combat burnout, is to teach children that losing is a part of your evolution, right? And there's a quote that I'd like to share oftentimes when this topic gets brought up. I think it's a Chinese proverb. I could be wrong, but it says, if I knew what I know about mistakes back then, I would have made more. And I think that's a powerful quote that I often like to convey to others.
Yeah, I really like that. And we have a lesson at our run club where we, try to talk about embracing failures or, making mistakes and learning from those things. So I definitely am going to have to add that in there, because I think that that's super great and totally makes sense, right?
Can I say
Do you
one
have,
thing?
oh,
Can
go
I say,
ahead.
because I have such a deep admiration and respect for runners. When I was at USF as a Division I basketball player, I think, and I'm not just saying this because of your background, but I think runners have the strongest mindsets, because I hate running.
Everybody says that.
But the people that love it, I just admire them. And some of my really dear friends from college were runners, and they have some of the toughest mindsets. So I wanted to make sure I brought it up to give you and anyone else listening that are runners that I have a true admiration for runners, because it's something I don't think I could have done. And I think I'm decently mentally tough. So I just want to say that. So thank you. Yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. It's one of those like chicken or the egg kind of things. Like, do runners all have a great mindset, or do only the people who have that mindset get into running? You know what I mean? But I don't have like the mental, I guess it's a different mindset, right? Like, I could never do team sports. I'm not a great team player. I hate to admit that, but I'm not. I mean, seriously, like, ask my husband, I'm not a great team player, right? So that's one thing that I think can be really a different way of thinking about things and being, mentally tough, but also just like, in a basketball game, and I'm gonna, make myself sound dumb at sports because I don't really know anything about them, but you miss a shot, you have to just get over it and keep playing. Like, that is not something nope. Like, I have my entire run to either get it right or get it wrong, but I'm not getting it wrong 50 times and still have to keep going. You know what I mean? So it's a completely different way that you have to be mentally tough, right? But I do think I'm lucky with coaching running, because there's so many just like regular life lessons that go in with running. You know what I mean? But I'm sure you see that in your sports as well, that you're just like, it just comes naturally, right?
Yeah. Well, I think I struggled for so many years to find something to really convey what sports and what EMA should represent. And it wasn't until I stumbled on the Nelson Mandela quote that we plastered on our home page. Sports is just the best platform to attract children and speak their language, and I think anyone that's really using sports as a magnet to really develop better humans deserve a huge round of applause, because I think that's the true purpose of us as adults, is pushing the next generation of humans and leaders further ahead to continue to move the movement of creating the right culture and world. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that quote is awesome as well. You got lots of good quotes that I'm going to have to steal. Um,
I'm the
Shifting gears
quote
a
guy.
little,
I have a
are
quote for
you?
every single thing.
That probably also makes you a great coach, right? I mean, you just have quotes ready for any situation, right? Um, you talked a little bit about the coach relationship and how coaches are able to help shape kids because of the connections that they have. Can you talk a little bit about the parent of young athletes, like their role, as much as they're still, being supportive and all those things, like the role is different than a coach,
Yeah.
correct?
Oh man, the parent child relationship, it's so fragile. And I say this because I've been on both spectrums, meaning I've coached for so long and I have a son that I coach through the academy. So I want to preface with saying I understand sometimes the need for parents to feel fully immersed into their child's experience to the point where they almost feel like they're living through them, especially the ones that see their child exhibiting more success than they did. And people would always wonder, like, how can you sit in the corner where your son can't see you for games and not say one word? I say it's because I want him to enjoy this process as if it's his own. Because I think when we as parents continue to interject ourselves into our children's experiences, we're robbing them of truly enjoying it for themselves. So I think every child is different. Every child and parent situation is different. So there's no real cookie cutter type of blueprint. But I think for me, a parent should first have a conversation with themselves and understand, like, this is what my child wants. This is not what I want. And I think if you can start off by having that conversation with yourself, that's the first good step to take. And then making sure each coach that you have your child in front of is serving them first and not the organization, which is very hard because we're around a culture where it's all about winning. And if it's about winning, it's about the organization and not the child. But I always interject this thought. We as parents need to make sure that we're investing our child in the right environment, because oftentimes I wonder, why is it that we need licenses to fish, but you don't need anything but a background check to really interact with a child? And to me, when you go back to the psychology of the human brain, no matter who you are, we're all mentors to children. Because when you interact with a child, you're modeling behavior. And I think as a parent, the first thing you should do, you should meet, and we tell the parents this when they sign up to the academy, we are partners in you helping you raise your child. So we have to see sports as a platform to helping our children become better adults. We're not doing this for the child. We're doing this for when the adult gets older, they can look back and say, Mom and Dad, thank you so much for putting me in these environments to help me model what I want to be when I grow up. So the parent-child relationship is incredibly fragile, but I think if you approach it the right way, subtract your ego and yourself from your child's journey, it helps you really help you become more of a co-pilot than a pilot. But it's very hard because a lot of the youth sports are trending in the wrong direction. Yeah, long-winded answer.
Oh, I mean, I like the long-winded answers because then I have to say less, right? So obviously that was like good tips for parents, just like in general, I would say too. Do you have any specific, like, are there specific things parents need to do to get their kids ready to be on a more serious team? Whether it, I mean, I don't, we are going to talk about your academy in a second, but I mean, like the school teams, travel leagues, like, are there specific things they can do to help support and then get their kids ready for that that might just be different from, what you just said, which was also really great?
Another great question. And I think every city, every town, every state is different and unique. So again, there's not a cookie cutter blueprint for each, but I'm gonna speak in terms of the Bay Area and San Francisco. And I like to use the terminology reverse engineer. And what that means from my vantage point is, where do you want your child to be, or where does your child want to be? And once you've identified that, now you have to work backwards and understand that there's certain steps that need to be taken in order for your child to get there. And I think really understanding that there's a lot of discipline and commitment that needs to go in to trying to make these teams at an earlier age. And what I've found is a lot of families do their research too late, or get to a point where it's like 1 or 2 years before that big moment comes, where they're trying to cram. It's like cramming for a test, right? You can't cram for a final exam the last 2 weeks or weeks of the test. You have to be going to class, you have to be taking notes, you have to be doing the pop quizzes. So my answer to that is, the preparation for these teams don't start a year or two before those team tryouts. It starts before, right? It starts with not specializing, really indulging in different sports, so that child or that player and student can learn different skill sets that adds value to that one sport they're going to take seriously, right? Indulging in the right culture so the child doesn't get burned out. Being in the right environment, finding the right coaches that want them to get to that next level, because there's a lot of coaches. There's two coaches. There's a coach that wants your child to serve them, and it's about winning. And there's other coaches that want to be that springboard to get that child to play at the best level or the highest level that they're capable of, which is not easy. So again, the step starts earlier in their lives. And I think really knowing what those steps are by doing your research and connecting with the right people and connecting with the people that have done it at the highest level. And oftentimes a lot of these coaches that are coaching these children have never been there, but are telling them, I can get you there. It's like going to the safari in Africa and asking someone that's never been given these tours to give you a tour. And you're like, how is that even possible? So yeah, I'll stop there because I can go on, but it's really knowing what steps need to be taken and taking them by having the right counsel.
No, and I think that's great because there's definitely things that you can talk to people about if you've never actually done it, right? Like, teachers maybe or something, there's different kinds of roles that you can have where you don't need to know those things, but then there are some things that it's like, if you haven't been there, it's really hard to be telling people how to get there, right?
Yep.
So yeah, no, I think that is definitely helpful. So now I want you just to brag all about your EmpowerMe Academy. But first, can you tell us where you are / where it is, and then who, besides probably just like all kids, right? Like, who is it for? What are they doing there? Kind of just like all the deets.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me to brag. I like the word brag about EMA, EmpowerMe Academy. We're stationed in San Francisco, and the location is in kind of the Presidio community. And it serves all children because, my background, I came from the Caribbean, and although it's surrounded by beautiful sand, it wasn't one of the most resourceful countries. So I like to say I came from a background where sports or crime was the only outlet, and I chose sports. So I understand the need for finding something that helps you create a stronger North Star and staying on the path of becoming a better version. But then as I came to San Francisco, where EMA is, and I started interacting with a more affluent community. And even before that, when I went to Chicago and visited for a tournament, when I started seeing what these big cities look like, what success looks like, my horizon started expanding. I started believing, it's like you can't be it unless you see it. So the whole idea for EMA is to attract all children from all backgrounds and give them the platform to embrace one another, to connect with one another, to compete with one another, to respect one another, all under a very safe environment with the right modeling by our coaches, and really just focusing on develop them into leaders. And that's our mantra, right? You're going to be a great player, but you're also going to be a better human. And that came from my mom always echoing to me that make sure who you are as a person outshines who you are as a player. So I've taken that mindset and that culture that was embedded in me from a young age and infused it into EMA. Been doing it for 9 years. I've been coaching children for 20 years. And we're working on getting our own home, which we're going to call the mothership. We're actually negotiating that now. And once we create the mothership, the goal is to create satellites throughout the country, because we believe that the culture that EMA breeds into our community and our children needs to be replicated, because it's all about empowerment. Whereas though the counterculture, we like to call it, where it's all about winning, they need to have an arch nemesis of positivity, which we like to think. You know, every bad guy needs a good guy. And that's what EMA represents. The different narrative where sports is not about the end result, it's about the journey. Similar to running. Yeah.
Well, first of all, when you are actually putting your satellites out, feel free to reach out to me all the way over here on the East Coast, because I would be definitely interested in talking about that for sure. What age do you start having kids come in at?
We would like to think kindergarten, but we've had people reach out saying, I know the intake year starts at kindergarten, but any chance you can take my child there in preschool? So there's a huge craving for what we're providing. And that's been one of the issues we've ran into. A lot of people don't know this type of culture and academy exists. And that's why Marianne and her team are doing an outstanding job of pulling more media to us to really create a bigger following. And so we started kindergarten, but we have taken on children before because we couldn't resist. We don't like to say no. We want everyone to be embraced at the academy.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking that must be, I mean, I know the challenges I have, we do from 3 to 13, and 3, 4, 5 can be really hard because some of those concepts just are so abstract
Yes.
for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I was just curious what age you start at. And now this is going to make me sound like I didn't Google you enough, but do they do all kinds of sports when they're with you, or is it just basketball
Just
focused, or am
basketball.
I just way off? Okay.
That's a good
That's what I
question.
thought.
Yeah.
And then I was like, are they doing other things too? Okay. Now I'm just trying to be more educated on basketball because my husband's a big basketball person. And I think the fact that I know nothing is like probably really annoying. What are some of the first skills that you teach the kids in terms of basketball? Because I also imagine a full-size basketball is like too big for them to do a lot with. Am I not understanding how this goes?
No, you're spot on. And that's a valuable question. And tell your husband I respect him for loving basketball, because I think biasly it's the best sport, team sport. Let me make sure I say that. Best team sport out there. But I think that the skills, and we have a whole curriculum for every age or every group. And I think the first thing you teach a child at that age is hand-eye coordination, right? Which translates to every sport. Dribbling, right? And the ball should be a little bit smaller so they can be able to grip it, but just dribbling, because that actually accomplishes hand-eye coordination, but also having control. And really just the planting and the movement of the feet, right? Those 3 things is what we focus on at a young age. But it's interesting because, as you know, basketball is such a huge resource for instant gratification. And I think you alluded to it earlier about how stuff happens so fast and so consistently or constantly. So children see Steph Curry on TV and all they think about is, I want to make shots. But what we do, we take a step back and teach them, in order to be good at making shots, we have to build a strong foundation, which is hand-eye coordination, dribbling, and being able to, how to go left and right without really blinking. So those are the things, just the motor skills, the skills that are required for playing all sports.
So what I'm hearing is I need to go buy a smaller basketball and practice dribbling because that's the first thing I need to do probably also. Is that right?
Yeah. And you need to, because it's the hardest thing to learn, right? And I think the sooner you get a child learning how to dribble a ball, the easier it is for them to learn to play basketball, because learning how to dribble a ball impacts everything. It improves your feel, it improves your hand-eye coordination, it improves your arm strength, right? And it warms up the whole body, because it takes the whole body to really maneuver the ball and dribble it, which impacts shooting, because if the ball feels good in your hands, it allows you to be more familiar and comfortable shooting the ball, which is not in your hand for a long duration. Because when you catch and shoot, it's only in your hand. But if you're dribbling, the ball is constantly touching your hands. And basketball is a huge field game. Yeah.
Wow, I feel like I learned a little bit more about basketball, so that I feel accomplished now too. Um, well, okay, that's all the questions I had for you, but do you have anything I forgot to talk about, or also where can we find you? Obviously, I'm going to put the links in the notes as well.
Well, you can find us at empowermeacademy.net. And, we've exhausted a lot of resources to have a huge online presence. As I said, we hired MSR to help us amplify that, because we believe in a world where youth sports is trending into a very win at all costs culture, that we feel that our messaging and our culture needs to continue to cut through this thick fog of toxicity in youth sports. So it's easy to really just Google us. I think that one thing we're really proud of is we have 84, 85 Google reviews, 5-star reviews. And it's not because of the 5-star, it's the fact that each review, it's kind of like an inside view of that family's experience with EMA. And what I've been able to convince me and my team is that those reviews will happen in every major city we put EMA in. And it shows that there's a true craving for EmpowerMe Academy. So you just type in EmpowerMe Academy in Google and sit back and just see a floodgate of opportunities to learn about what we're doing over here in San Francisco.
Yeah, I love that. And that's so awesome that you're getting that feedback from people. And like, as parents, it's so nice to see like, wow, look at all these positive impacts. So that is so awesome. And thank you again for taking the time to talk with me. And I love what you're doing. It sounds so cool. And like I said, when you
Likewise.
are working on expanding, let me know, because I'm very interested in any way that we can support you over here. So thank you again so much.
Oh, this was awesome. And Marian, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted me to talk about, but I thought this was fantastic.
You're right.
Yeah. One thing I want to say before we leave, on top of all the feedback we get, one of the most energizing feedback is when we have former athletes or even parents come to the sessions, witness it, and say, I wish I had this when I was growing up. That's all the motivation we need for parents who have lived a long life. Say that I wish I had EMA, and that's what keeps us going. So thank you for what you're doing and giving me an opportunity to speak about this magical thing that's called sometimes the Apple version of youth sports. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so awesome. I love that. And yeah, I mean, as you're saying it, I'm like, I wish we had more stuff like this when I was growing up too. So thank you again for everything you're doing. And thank you again for taking the time to tell us all about it.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day. And it was awesome meeting your son. What is his name?
This is James. You want to say hi?
Yeah.
He's been waving to you, but I don't think he
Oh,
can see it on the
I'm
thing.
sorry.
You want to
Hello.
wave? Oh, now he's just gonna.
That smile was my paycheck. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm
That's
glad we delivered something good here.
yeah, love children.
I just want to thank Coach Gumbs again for being such an amazing guest. Obviously, you heard, and I should have put a warning at the beginning that you're going to hear my toddler interrupting us a little bit, but He was just so patient and so kind, and I really appreciate him sharing all the information that he had. Love what he's doing with EmpowerMe Academy. Can't wait to see where more of them are going to be popping up, how they're spreading, all of the really awesome things that they're doing. So really great to have him, and awesome that he was able to find some time to talk with us about everything that he has going on. And in other news, the Youth Mental Health Project Run Fest by American Run Club. I'm sure I've talked about it before. I'm sure you've heard it. You're not going to be not hearing it anymore. Too many negatives, but I will be talking about it a bunch. It is going to be in May. We are doing a fun running event to benefit the Youth Mental Health Project. It will be virtually and locally. So my local people, I'm sure at this point you probably know where to find it. Otherwise, you know where to find me to ask me where the event's going to be. But we are doing virtually as well. We're going to do a 1-hour distance challenge, which is kind of just a different kind of running event, especially for our area. So I thought that would be fun to do something a little different, challenging, kind of keeping it fresh, but also will be fun to be able to see people in other places also doing it, because we're going to have a Strava group. So we'll be able to see what everyone is up to distance wise. So all of my not local people, please consider signing up, because not only is it for a good cause, but the one thing, and I've talked about this a bunch, I love about running is the community and the fact that you can connect with runners in all different places. So feel free to check that out, because it will be really cool. I promise you will get a t-shirt. You will get all of the cool stuff from Packet Pickup in the swag bag. So it'll be worth it. I promise. So check. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe, all the things that you can do for a podcast that you enjoy listening to. Make sure you check out social media, our website, any of those things. If you have questions, comments, interview requests, feel free to email me at marickyrunclub@gmail.com.